Hey guys, Tim here from Algonaut once again. Okay, so if you're wanting to make a head-banging drum and bass tune, you really need a grunty bass. That swirly, angry, distorted bass you get from guys like Noisia, Pendulum, High Contrast, it's really pretty much the basis of the track. But it's definitely not an easy sound to make, as it's quite technical. So today I'm going to cover the basics, just the basics of how to make that iconic stadium drum and bass sound using just Massive and one other plugin. Hopefully it'll push you in the right direction, and from there you can add your own layer of tweaks and character to make it your own. Once again, as part of these Underground Masterclass videos, at the end I'll give you a pack of all the patches, audio loops, MIDI and that kind of stuff that you can use royalty-free in your own music. So let's get into it. Okay, so we're going to be using Massive for this sound. A lot of people use Serum as well, and that's quite good, but Massive is completely capable of doing it. Basically, we just need Massive and one other plugin called OTT, a multi-band compressor, but we'll get to that later on. So let's get into it. So we'll go from init patch, new sound. What have we got? Just a saw wave. So really what we want here is two oscillators. One's going to be the noise, the kind of grit of the sound. The other's going to be the body. And then we want to be doing heaps of unison, heaps of modulation, and then the multi-band compression. And that's essentially it. So first oscillator, let's start with the grit. So I'm going to choose a waveform. Now I'm going to choose one here called Carbon. Now just bear in mind, when you're making your own massive drum bass, you don't have to use these waveforms. I've had successful results using all kinds of waveforms, but these happen to be the ones I just recently used, and they seem to do quite well. Carbon's quite a good one for the grit, because the wavetable actually has heaps of character as you dial the knob around. There's just so much to play with, and later on, if we need to make tiny tweaks, we can just make tiny movements on this oscillator and it can really make a big difference. So we'll just get a bit of a tone going, some grit. Now I want to add some modulation to this, so I'm going to get an LFO down here. I'm going to set this up to just a sine wave, and we'll keep the restart on, so that every time I press a note on the keyboard it's going to restart. We'll assign this to the amp. And dial it up. Maybe speed it up a little bit. Just playing with the tone a bit. That's alright. Maybe we'll do the same thing with the pitch as well. So we'll put pitch, dial that up to maybe... There we go, bit of movement. So far sounds pretty weak. Let's get the second oscillator in there. So now what we're going to want to use is, in this case I'm just going to use the default, the square and saw, but I've had some pretty good results using some of these other ones down the bottom. Bender and Herbie are quite good. Some of these ones in the analog electric column are quite nice as well, the groans and the drives. But basically you want something that's a bit heavier that also sounds modulated. So let's turn the first oscillator off, and we're going to put the LFO on the wavetable for the second oscillator, so it has heaps of movement. Now obviously you're way too high on the keyboard as well. Let's go down. That's an F. So you can hear that kind of movement. It's not static like this. Static and boring. Movement. And it's restarting every time I hit the note. Turn on the first oscillator. It's adding that grit. Okay, for a bit more grit, let's turn on some noise. So down here, the noise oscillator, we're going to set this to, I find white or bright to be quite good, but either or. Let's go with bright. Just dial it up just a little bit. So just get a bit of dust. And this noise and dust and grit is important later on as we add a multi-band compressor, because we want to basically squash the whole sound, and the upward multi-band compressor will take the highs and just crank them. And that's what gets that really bright, angry character. Okay, we definitely need a filter, so let's get on with that. So, serial, put the second filter up, mix the two. I'm just going to check something as well. Sometimes with when you init a sound in Massive, the oscillator over here, as it has, let's put glide to full. Let's just turn that down. We don't want glide. We don't want this. Oh, it's not in monophonic. Glide is when it does this. It actually sounds kind of cool, but not yet. We'll dial it in maybe later. Okay, filters. So I'm going to use the aft filter, just because it seems to be kind of brighter and kind of easier on the ear when you're at the full cutoff. Low pass 2 seems to cut out a bit too much. We don't really want any resonance. So what does this sound like? Sounds pretty cool, nice and warm and fat. Let's put an LFO on that as well. So we're not going to use the same LFO, we're going to use the 6th one. Now it's important as well not to go and put too many LFOs with different timings all across the synth, as what you tend to get is this kind of washiness. All the LFOs kind of compete and you just get this sound that's quite indistinct. I find 1 or 2 LFOs is better to get a really strong, simple, powerful character out of your sound. I might dial the other direction. Oh, we'll go sine wave only, maybe speed it up. Yeah. Maybe a bit too fast. Not too bad. Alright. Alright, let's add a little bit of distortion. I'm going to use the tele tube. We'll dial this back a little bit. Turn it down. Kind of fattens it up a little bit. Catches some of those highs as well. So now we need to really widen and thicken this up. And the way we're going to do that is with unison. So we're going to go to the voicing tab here. And let's play with this. So I've already put it on monophonic before. Let's dial the unison up. So I find anything between 4 and 8 voices is quite good. Getting good, but now all the unison voices are right on top of each other. We want to spread them across the pitch and stereo spread. So we'll turn on pitch cutoff and dial this up a little bit. So I could just use a slider, but I'm just going to use the lower threshold. So you don't want much. And again, anywhere between say 5 and 10 digits here seems to be enough. If you go too far, it becomes a bit of a mess. Pretty loud still. And we'll do stereo spread as well. So pan position on. We'll push this out to the right or left, doesn't really matter. Okay, not too bad. Let's get some EQing. So we'll go EQ, maybe push the bass a bit. And the high shelf. Could even chuck an LFO, the 6th one, on the high shelf to really push the highs up as it opens up. Just got to figure out which way is actually up. Alright, that's the basis for massive, but now obviously we want to make this really crank, and this is where we need another plugin. Massive doesn't have built-in a multiband compressor, but you can get one for free from Exafir Records called OTT. You can download this from Splice actually for free, and basically what it is, it's a multiband compressor, but it's a really extreme one, and just putting it on the track should make a massive difference. So without it, on. Heaps of noise, but obviously it's being a bit too compressed. So let's dial it up. Down a little bit. Highs up. A little bit of tweaking. Not too bad. Okay. I'm going to check a limiter on this as well, just in case if it gets too loud, it doesn't clip. So Fat Filter Pro L is a good one. I'll just change the setting to House Fat and Punchy. That's actually quite a good one. Then we can kind of crank it a bit more. And then what we can do, we can add a little bit more character by chucking a reverb in front of that multiband compression. So let's go and get Valhalla room. Dial it way back because it's going to be way too much. Cool, but not what we want. Shorten it up. I'd even choose a smaller room, medium room. This is kind of giving the highs a bit more of a tail, and then our multiband compressor catches that and really cranks them up. Okay, so that's the basics there. basic massive patch running into OTT multiband compressor. So where could you go from here if you're making this your own? You could try messing around with the oscillator wavetables and changing them around, trying some different modulation positions. You can put the LFO on all kinds of things like these intensity knobs, especially if you dial them into these bend functions. They actually add quite a bit of sound, quite a bit of character. Let's do a bit of tweaking with this carbon knob. I'll show you what I mean by small changes massively affecting the sound. Heaps going on there. As well as that, you could put a few more effects on. You could try a flanger. Heaps you can do. Alright, one more thing I wanted to add to this as well. I've had to come back and do this. One more key step is to add a big punch to each note. So the way we do that, if I play massive now, sounds pretty good, but we want to add an envelope to the pitch. So what we want to do is get envelope 1, we'll dial this onto the pitch for oscillator 1 and 2, crank it to full, and it's going to sound like this. Not what we want, but let's turn the sustain to 0 and the decay really short. Now we're going to get this big pitch, pitch drop every time you hit a note. And we want that. So what I'll do now is I'm going to record a pattern, but let's get a beat going first. So over here I've got a beat I've already made. Let's have a listen. Turn it on. So I'll just quickly describe what's going on here, but we have another video that describes how to make drum and bass beats as well, so check that out if you're interested. But essentially what we've got is 2 instances of Atlas. So here's Atlas 1. This is the fundamental drums. So we've got a map here that we've made called Algo big drums. I'm going to solo, that's the hats and the kick and the snare. So we've got a kick, snare at the same time. That's my kick, snare, and then the hats and stuff. But it's quite polite at the moment. It's kind of missing all that groove. But one thing you can do here is just swap out this kit entirely. So I can go and get different results that way. I'll go back. And then I've got another Atlas instance as well doing the groove loop. So let's give this a solo. So this is basically Atlas here. Whole different kit. With some heavy processing. So over here we've got dirt to kind of fatten it up. Solid EQ with some pretty extreme settings. So I'm basically doing a massive high pass, massive low pass, and a bit of boosting. And then decimort to grit it up even further. And once again, we can just go new kit and completely change this groove loop. I will go back to the original one I had. So that's my drums. Oh, one more thing as well, the processing on the whole thing. Those 2 instances of Atlas are basically being routed into one big group. And then over here we've got the UAD processing. We love the universal audio plugins. They sound great. So we've got a preamp to push it a bit and give it a bit more crunch. And then we've got the vitalizer. We can also process it and add in more high and low frequencies to give it a bit more warmth and brightness. And then lastly, a compressor. And I like the Fatso for doing my drum loops. Without it, it sounds quite underprocessed. Okay, cool. So we've got the massive patch and the sound sounding pretty good. And we've got the drums. Cool. Now let's record a pattern and then make an audio loop. So let's have a bit of a play first. Yeah. Alright, it's a bit loose. Let's tighten tidy that up. Quantize. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Pretty cool. All right, so let's record that as an audio loop. So we're going to get a new channel. Here we go. And we're going to set the ins to from massive 22. I don't want to record the side chain, so I'm going to put the side chain on the audio channel. Then I'm going to record 2. So the recording is without the side chain. And let's give that a go. And while I'm looking on it, let's give it a bit more analog warmth. So I'm going to dial in some more plugins. Back to universal audio. Let's also chuck on a preamp to thicken it up. Cool. A bit of a compressor. So let's use the we'll use the LA2A Silver. Quite like that one. For instruments. Way too much. About -5 dB. Cool. Alright, let's record that loop. Good to go. Coming from 22 massive, monitor in, we'll go audio to sends only so we don't hear a duplicate. And there we go, monitor auto. This is the loop recorded. Sweet. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make 10 more patches and do 10 more patterns and 10 more audio loops, and I'll give them all to you. So I'll fade to back me back in a sec. Alright, I'm back, and I've made 10 different bass lines using Massive and a few other plugins. They're all slightly different with slightly different effects, but essentially using the same techniques that we've covered. So let's have a listen. Alright, cool. So there's 10 massive drum and bass lines there, made with a little more than just Massive plugin and the free OTT multiband compressor, and a few reasonably simple techniques that hopefully you followed in this tutorial. If you guys enjoyed this, then I can do another tutorial and go a bit more crazy on Massive with a few more effects. So just let me know in the comments. Other than that, feel free to download all these sounds through the pack in the description. You can grab that from our site, and I'll catch you next time.